hand in hand with the United States Attorney's Office and our law enforcement partners.
Let me back this up. This is probably pretty important.
We expect to hear from Michael Sherwin from the District of Columbia.
Turn it up a little bit. Let's listen to it.
And also the FBI office. Stephen Dontuano, I believe.
Dontuano!
Quick update on the FBI's activities since the violence and destruction at the Capitol last week. The FBI is quite familiar with large-scale, complex, and fast-moving investigations. We are up to the challenge. As Director Wray says, the FBI does not do easy. To be clear, the brutality the American people watched with shock and disbelief on the 6th will not be tolerated by the FBI. The men and women of the FBI will leave no stone unturned in this investigation. Since these events, the FBI has worked hand in hand with the United States Attorney's Office and our law enforcement partners here in D.C. and across the country to arrest and charge multiple individuals who took part in the destruction. In 6 days, we have opened over 160 case files, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The significance of this investigation is not lost on us. This is a 24/7, full-bore, extensive operation into what happened that day. We cannot do our job without the help of the American people. Since our call for tips, videos, and pictures, we have received more than 100,000 pieces of digital media, which is absolutely fantastic. And we are scouring every one for investigative and intelligence leads. We continue to ask for more. If you have information, contact 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit photos and videos to fbi.gov/US Capitol, that's Capitol with an O. I want to stress that the FBI has a long memory and a broad reach. Agents and our partners are on the streets investigating leads not only here in the DC area, but also across the country through the FBI's 56 field offices. So even, like I've said before, even if you've left DC, agents from our local field offices will be knocking on your door if we find out that you were part of the criminal activity at the Capitol. But before...
This is called a dragnet. Whenever they put out information to 56 different field offices, it's called a dragnet. That means everybody's on the same page towards knowing what to do. That is the very exact same thing that they put me on in 2009 in the fall, after I'd made a telephone call to Mr. Pat Burns in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that at that time was working with the United States Marshals, that made reference that I had threatened him. They put out an all-points bulletin. It's called a dragnet. To the point that I could not go nowhere. I could not do nothing without being scrutinized, looked at, analyzed, targeted, stalked, and harassed by federal law enforcement agencies all over the country. And it didn't matter if I was in Missouri. It didn't matter if I was out in Oklahoma. It didn't matter if I was out in Arkansas, where Sam Walton started Walmart. It didn't matter if I was in Kentucky. It didn't matter if I was here in Tennessee or down in Memphis, Tennessee, or down in Atlanta, Georgia. They literally are down all the way into Jacksonville, Florida. They literally made my life miserable between Secret Service and the FBI by putting out this type of unjust all-points bulletin dragnet on me. If other individuals have been treated even similar towards the way that I've been treated, I'm pretty sure you probably won't be getting a whole lot of information from the people that's actually guilty, knowing that they've been seen on cameras while the destruction was going on January the 6th in the year 2021. simply because people are not as kind-hearted and as good-hearted as I am. My Bible tells me to pray for my enemies, to love my enemies, and to do good to those that despitefully use me and take advantage of me. That's exactly what I've been in the process of doing now for the 30 plus years. Because I guarantee you, if I would have resisted law enforcement, beginning whenever they first started putting me on the radar screen, which was 1983, whenever I made a telephone call to the White House, I guarantee you I would have been locked up for life without no parole, because they would have got a dirty judge and a dirty whatever towards basically burying me for life. But because I was smart enough not to resist, not to react in a violent type way, even though they have picked and poked at me, even though they have harassed and intimidated me, even though they have falsely accused me, either in Kentucky, Tennessee, Oklahoma, or yes, even Georgia, down in the Atlanta area, even though they have done these things to me, I'm still alive, and I can still speak, I can still talk. And that's the reason why that I'm making this particular tape, or this particular data form, is to let people know a little bit about my story. But the fact of the matter is, there was lawlessness that went on up at the Capitol that literally made me sick, that literally messed up my nerves, that is literally a heartbreak to the free, open democracy that we as a society over here is supposed to be about. But I guarantee you, there was probably a lot of those that was doing the protesting that has similar towards stories that I have. Now, I don't know who's guilty. I don't know who's innocent, other than myself. And I can sit here with an open mind and tell you that I am not guilty of any of the attacks that they have tried to bring up onto my personal life pertaining to the dragnet. Let's get back on schedule towards listening to what they have to say, because this is actually the first public notice that we're getting since January the 6th, which has been going on six full complete days now. The 7th day will be tomorrow, which will be Wednesday. So let's listen to what the professionals, the experts, the authorities have to say about these regards.
Before we do this is your opportunity to come forward, as several individuals who were involved in Wednesday's riots have done, to volunteer about their participation. In the weeks leading up to the January 6th rally, the FBI worked internally with every FBI field office to ensure we were looking for any intelligence that may have developed about potential violence during the rally on January 6th. We developed some intelligence that a number of individuals were planning to travel to the D.C. area with intentions to cause violence. We immediately shared that information, and action was taken, as demonstrated by the arrest of Enrique Tarrio by the Metropolitan Police Department the night before the rally.
Let's back it up. Let's back it up. Hope.
To volunteer about their participation. In the weeks leading up to the January 6th rally, the FBI worked internally with every FBI field office to ensure we were looking for any intelligence that may have developed about potential violence during the rally on January 6th. We developed some intelligence that a number of individuals were planning to travel to the D.C. area with intentions to cause violence.
So they already know about it. They was warned. They was given a heads up about the safety and the security of not just the American people, but heads of state, people in the Congress, people in the Senate, uppity up people. Let's listen to the rest of this.
We immediately shared that information, and action was taken, as demonstrated by the arrest of Enrique Tarrio by the Metropolitan Police Department the night before the rally. Other individuals were identified in other parts of the country and their travel subsequently disrupted. The FBI receives enormous amounts of information and intelligence, and our job is to determine the credibility and viability of it under the laws and policies that govern FBI investigations. We have to separate the aspirational from the intentional and determine which of the individuals saying despicable things on the internet are just practicing keyboard bravado or they actually have the intent to do harm. In the latter, we work diligently to identify them and prevent them from doing so. As offensive as a statement can be, the FBI cannot open an investigation without a threat of violence or alleged criminal activity. However, when that language does turn to a call of violence or criminal activity, the FBI is able to undertake investigative action. And in this case, we had no indication information was linked to any specific person, but this is a matter of an online discussion. This information was immediately disseminated through a written product and briefed to our command post operations to all levels of law enforcement. Part and parcel of our investigation into violent actors is the fact that we continue to gather intelligence that will aid in our ability to disrupt possible future violent activity. Suffice it to say, we are leveraging our relationships with federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, using our tools at our disposal to find and bring everyone involved in last week's criminal activity to justice. I'm now going to turn over to Acting U.S. Attorney Michael Sherman.
Now, wait a minute. Before he comes on board, gives you some information that's possibly misleading or not the whole truth. When it comes to threats, they talked about those that they know that done some threatening, and they even disrupted some of their travels to Washington, D.C., I'm assuming by pulling them over and maybe giving them a little bit of a shakedown. I call it a shakedown. But without hardcore evidence that the individual is on its way to Washington, D.C., I guess they let him go. Okay? In 1990, I think it was in 90 or 91, I'd have to look at the records to prove it, but I've got all the documentation to prove what I'm talking about. I was on my way to Wheeling, West Virginia, going up through the northern route from here, which would be the southern route of Indiana, going on over in Ohio, going on over in Virginia, West Virginia, I mean, towards going to Washington, D.C. I was stopped by two state troopers in Ohio. They gave me a fair warning. Told me to turn my little Dodge Omni car around, head back to Tennessee if I had any sense, and forget about going to Washington, D.C. I wound up stopping that night, knowing that they was monitoring my my whereabouts. Got a motel, and that night, the motel house room was broken into by two Secret Service agents that literally kicked the door in while apprehended me and throwing me into the Wheeling, West Virginia local jailhouse. I had an idea that that could possibly occur, to the point that I actually took the sword box that the sword symbolizing peace on earth was in and put it into a ravine that later my attorney, Jolene Nugent, and her assistant had to climb all the way down just to be able to obtain it, just to be able to bring the sword box back, to be able to use the sword box for validated proof pertaining to my story. In the meantime, I stay in Wheeling, West Virginia for almost a week before I even know what I'm charged for. Finally, all of a sudden, they give me my paperwork telling me that I had been charged for threatening the President of the United States, which at that time was George Walter Bush. I think he's got a fourth name. I don't forget now what the fourth name is. But this would be George Sr. that come in off of the coattail of Ronald Reagan. In doing so, they had a sham court with sham charges, with a sham defense attorney, that they was dead set that I was not going to make it to Washington, D.C. for whatever reason, in which my reasons was not in violence. My reasons was to only reveal the truth about what had occurred, to the point that they ordered for a 45-day evaluation of this and a 45-day evaluation of that, and neither one could be done simultaneously. That after I finished one evaluation, I had to go right into another evaluation, and basically took 6 months out of my life in Raleigh, North Carolina, being studied like a laboratory rat by the United States government. Oh boy, did they ever fish? Did they ever try to persuade? Did they ever try to trick me into saying, oh yeah, I was on my way to Washington, D.C. to do bodily harm to the President of the United States? I never gave in. I never caved in. And you know why I didn't cave in? Because there wasn't nothing to cave in for. Because that was never my intentions to begin with, towards going to Washington, D.C. and trying to do bodily harm to the President of the United States. I only had a warning to give them pertaining to why that they had done what they done in 1980 and 8, pertaining to 9 tapes that wound up at the White House, that afterwards, that once more I got proof that I can validate this, wound up sending back to me after they studied them and listened to them for a great while. In the meantime, Ronald Reagan finally accomplished what he set out to accomplish through God, towards convincing the superpowers that the world wasn't going to be destroyed by a nuclear holocaust, but it was going to be destroyed the way that the Bible had predicted for it to be destroyed. That basically lifted the ban in 1980 and 8 after the tapes was received by the White House, and began the process towards ending of the Cold War, of the falling of the Berlin Wall. Every scenario or situation that I've been in, I can validate my innocence on, regardless whether it be here in Tennessee or in other places up in Kentucky, that they basically forced me to admit to a guilty charge that I never should have admitted to a guilty charge on. Now, they tried to do the same thing in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, after that occurrence took place, but I was good enough that I hired the right attorney that fought for me long enough. After going to the Oklahoma authorities 6 different times, they finally dropped the charges once they realized that they wasn't going to trick me into some sort of a pre-bargain deal towards admitting to something that I never done to begin with, which was threaten Mr. Pat Barnes. Now, once more, if a third of the people is up there in the White House due to the fact of the way that they have been bamboozled, hoodwinked, rode, taken advantage of, manipulated, or even stalked by the United States government, I can truly understand the reason why they're up there protesting. And there's nothing wrong with protesting. But to go up there with harmful intentions, to go up there wanting to create havoc, is unlawful and it's wrong. Now let's listen to what this Joe here's got to say of the incident that took place, of all the violence, January the 6th, the year 2021. Let's listen to this individual.
All right, thank you, Steve. I think I mentioned this before a few days ago that just to begin, I think the scope and scale of this.
Usually these agents, they're told real quick, don't get up there and Neanderthal, don't get up there and hee-haw, say what you need to say to the public, make it quick, simple, and to the point, and don't say nothing you ought not to say. They're briefed, and they know how to give out these briefings. Don't think for a second. But for us to have gotten a briefing almost a whole week after this incident has occurred tells you the seriousness and how complicated and how worried that these FBI law enforcement agencies truly are, regardless whether it be Secret Service, FBI, or other local or federal, state law enforcement agencies. Tells you how nervous, how concerned that they truly are.
Investigation in these cases are really unprecedented, not only in FBI history, but probably DOJ history, in which essentially the Capitol grounds outside and inside are essentially a crime scene. And a scale in which we have literally thousands of potential witnesses, and a scenario in which we're going to have, I believe, hundreds of criminal cases, both filed with our local courts, the Superior Court, and through the federal court system. So just to frame things, the enormity of this investigation is going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort, and this is not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to be solved within the coming weeks. It's not going to be solved within the coming months. This is going to be a long-term investigation, and rest assured, the Bureau, the Department of Justice, all the U.S. attorneys across the United States that are assisting these investigations, everyone is in for the long haul. So that being said, let's turn to the numbers that Steve referenced. And the numbers are going to geometrically increase. So as we sit here now, literally days after this event happened, we have already opened more than 170 subject files, meaning these individuals have been identified as potential persons that committed crimes on the Capitol grounds, inside and outside. So of those 170 cases that have already been opened, and I anticipate that's going to grow to the hundreds in the next coming weeks, we've already charged over 70 cases. And again, that number I suspect is going to grow into the hundreds. So what are the types of cases we initially charged? And I think there's some misconceptions, and I want to clarify some of those misconceptions, because given the enormity of the actors we saw both inside and outside the Capitol, the range of criminal conduct is really, I think, again, unmatched in any type of scenario that we've seen the FBI or the DOJ. We're looking at everything from simple trespass to theft of mail to theft of digital devices within inside the Capitol to assault on local officers, federal officers, both outside and inside the Capitol, to the theft of potential national security information or national defense information, to felony murder, and even civil rights excessive force investigations. So just the gamut of cases and criminal conduct we're looking at is really mind-blowing. And that has really put an enormous amount of work on the plate of the FBI and field office throughout the entire United States. So let's look at those initial cases. And again, I want to clarify some misconceptions. When criminal conduct occurs, we try to obviously charge people as soon as possible. So the way, looking just at the federal system, we'll try to do that via criminal complaint. So when these actors left the Capitol, these individuals, these defendants, obviously the impetus, the marching orders by federal law enforcement was to find, fix, and charge these individuals as fast as possible. So the prosecutors from the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, we looked for the most simple charge we could file as quick as possible. So therefore, the initial charges filed in these cases, a lot of them were misdemeanors. They were trespass cases. However, those cases were opened on those initial charges. We also had several firearms charges. We also had several felony charges that were open with assault and battery, illegal.
Well, see, that ain't what they told me up here in Kentucky. Kentucky has a national park called Land Between the Lakes. And at the very most, I should have been charged with misdemeanor charges pertaining to maybe telephone harassment. But because it was a federal park and they used their federal authority, they turned it into a federal charge, even though there was no verbal threat. And even though I had not violated any orders from a judge or from a panel of people, they still deemed it as stalking and went all the way up to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and grabbed me up. And I wound up losing 9.5 months out of my life pertaining to that event. Whenever you have law enforcement that operates in a backwoods, back alley, back attorney, back judge format, you're going to have people that's going to be angry. You're going to have people that's going to be upset. And whenever you get enough of them that's upset, you're liable to have a movement. And I'm pretty sure most of the people that was in the White House or around the Capitol January the 6th had some sort of personal beef either with local government, state government, or federal government. Because ordinarily people don't get involved in something this horrendous unless they really have a vendetta to score. I don't know everybody's story. And they're probably going to be like me. They don't know mine. But the first initial question that I got, other than the time delay, with it taking 6 days, how come the main people at the upper end, other than a few people that has resigned, such as the Capitol Police, and a few more other ones that's walked out, I think there's been 2 or 3 that's walked out of Donald Trump's cabinet, how come we know for a fact that certain Capitol policemen, which I think there's been 2 that's been chastised or been taken off of open duty, how come we know that this has to be something on a big, big scale beginning at the top with the President of the United States, but yet now we ain't seen the FBI put handcuffs on no senators or congressmen or no president? How come we ain't seen them arrest half of the precinct pertaining to the Capitol that was involved in this conspiracy? Once more, what does it take to form a conspiracy? 2 or more people. 2 or more people with the same ideology, with the same ideal, with the same thought pattern, with the same motives. It takes 2 or more people to be involved in a conspiracy. So it's no doubt a conspiracy has been occurred here. There's no doubt that this has been an insurrection towards people trying to take over the government or shut the government down, trying to stop the government from the government doing what the government is supposed to do. How come we ain't seen massive arrests on the upper end, and now you're just going after a few of the little fish down on the bottom end? That's the question that I have. That's the question that most of the Americans are going to have pertaining to their safety, their well-being, that we pay people like not just you, but your boss and your boss's boss that we pay to make sure that things is handled properly on the safety side, on our safety side. Once more, we as Americans feel like that we're going through one failure after another failure after another failure. And it's not just the massacres. It's not just the school shootings. It's not just the church shootings. It's not just the thing that happened out in Los Angeles pertaining to the casinos. It's not just the nightclubs. It's not just 9/11. It's not just what happened out in Oklahoma and down towards Waco, but it's all of it. It's every bit of it. How come we feel like that you people can't do your jobs? And you running after rabbit holes, such as myself, of somebody that's out here preaching the gospel, and just because I so much as step on a little wooden nickel, man, you're going to execute me. You're going to hang me off the cross. But yet now we see people right in front of our very eyes pertaining to high-ranking officials that still hadn't even been reprimanded. And you want to call this a fair system? judicial, fair system, and you can't do what you're supposed to do after not thousands of people. No. You better back up from your statement, sir. It's been millions of people, and probably by now, after this is circulated all over the world, it's probably been billions of people. It's probably reached a level of about 1 billion people that has now already seen this, been amazed by this. Some has been heartbroken by this. Some has been angered by this. Whenever something like this translates openly, hidden and open, but yet no, it still happened, and we're still not seeing the right people walk the plank, do you wonder how come people are getting emotionally upset over their own personal safety? Once more, I can only validate my testimony. I can only validate the things that's happened to me, regardless whether it was up in Kentucky, towards a bunch of idiots that was trying to make me out to be a terrorist, towards going to blow up the Kentucky Dam, or towards a bunch of idiots in Martin, Tennessee, that tried to use me by using a word of telling people that there was going to be an explosion of controversy in my life, that took that word and tried to change it along with the Weakley County authorities to the degree of charging me with falsifying files. The ordeal that happened to me out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that's all on record. I've got all these different pieces of paper to validate my story from head to toe. So I don't know what their story is, but I know what mine is. But you know what? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And Jesus taught us to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. So as I sat back and I watch this country be torn apart, and as I watch different things happening, regardless whether it's fires, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, or being $28 trillion in debt, or over 3 million people incarcerated in jails. That ain't counting all the people that's on file, pertaining to the people that's on probation. But whenever I sit back and watch all these illegitimacies happen, I know why they're happening. They're happening because we have a system that has violated and abused its own privileges towards protecting and providing safety for its own citizens, especially when we see something on this magnitude, and we know for a fact it has to be something deeper towards upper epillage, the people on the upper end, beginning with the president, the man, the main man. There's probably people involved in Secret Service that should be questioned about this, that note about this. There's probably people in your own agency, the FBI, that could have put out a better warning, that could have, just like 9/11, we could have been warned. Why are we paying you these? Why is the American people paying the system if the system continues to fail the American people? That's the $64,000 question that I got. And I'm sure it's not only the question that I got, but it's a question that a lot of people's got. And I'm just not talking about people that's got a beef with the government. I'm talking about bankers, lawyers, business people. I'm talking about people that is uppity up people that is good-hearted people, that go to church and believe in God and believe in living by the standards of the Bible. They are now questioning of whether or not if all of this, if there's something to it or not towards this uprising. And it is an uprising. It's an uprising that is occurring here in America amongst its own people.
Felonious possession of weapons. However, I want to clarify a misconception. This is only the beginning. So after these criminal charges are filed via criminal complaints, that allows law enforcement across the United States to arrest people from Dallas to Arkansas to Nashville to Cleveland to Jacksonville. That's what's happened over the past several days. It's really quite incredible. Now, after those charges are filed,
It is
then
incredible.
we have the ability to then indict these individuals.
I'm not going to lie to you. It is incredible how long the long arm of the law is. Okay? It's very incredible. You know, I know where a TBI guy is less than 5 miles away from my house that actually was called upon because he's in the same county that I'm in towards investigating where Dennis Jackson is, that went to my brother, questioned my brother about my whereabouts, and argued with my brother that there was no way that I could be in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, after an all-points bulletin come out on me up in Kentucky towards 2 telephone calls. Come to find out, the federal FBI in Oklahoma already knowed where I was. They'd done already been to my workplace. They'd done already searched my little toolbox. They'd done already searched my automobile. Why? Because of what happened in 2009 after I exposed the truth about what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 2005 pertaining to the Oklahoma bombing. Okay? They already knowed where I was. So all it took was a couple telephone calls, shuffle a couple pieces of paper around, and bingo, they're right there at my workplace, arresting me for 2 stalking charges of 1 to 5 years over the telephone. That shouldn't have been no less or no more than telephone harassment at that. Shouldn't even been telephone harassment, because once more, I made 1 telephone call and then waited about 90 days and made the second telephone call. 1 telephone call was to the LBL headquarters in Land Between the Lakes, to their law enforcement agency. The second telephone call was to a Gary Hawkins that worked for Land Between the Lakes, that worked in the forestry division. Between those 2 telephone calls cost me almost 10 months out of my life, and could have very well costed me my tools, my toolboxes. It did cost me a rental house in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It costed me my job, and could have costed me my truck and my trailer and everything else. It could have basically totally ruined me over 2 telephone calls. That was non-threatening, and I wasn't in no violation. But yet now I was stalking. I was stalking because I had an opinion. I was stalking because I was voicing my opinion. Once more, after they went all the way out to Oklahoma to get me and dragged me back to Kentucky, in Trigg County, Kentucky, then I was ordered to go get studied again, after I'd done already went through a rigmarole with Kentucky by going to Chicago being studied for another 6 months. Well, then I was ordered to go get studied again for another 6 months in LaGrange, Kentucky. Once more, I've got paperwork to validate what I'm saying. I'm not blowing smoke. That while I was up there, the doctors put me on Risperdal that causes obesity and breast enhancement. And to this day, that's one of the deteriorating factors that has helped my health to deteriorate, was because of what went on up in Kentucky. If you got people so upset that law enforcement is reacting and responding to people like me off of little bitty whatnot incidences, that, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't commit a crime. I did not commit a crime. But in order for me to get out of jail, I had to admit that I committed a crime in Kentucky, or else I'd still be in there from 1 to 5. Why? Because they got the system tied up. It's a buddy-buddy system. The ones that they like, they let go. The ones that they don't like, they make you do the long dance. Same way right here in Tennessee. I was forced to have to admit to a charge being concerned about the welfare of 3 little children across the road. And if I didn't admit to that charge that I had committed a crime, I would still probably be in the Weakley County Jail, or possibly went up to the state jail. Be doing state time. Yes. Those that they don't like, they punish. Those that's got a mouth, those that speak up, those that's standing up for a good purpose, they punish. They punish. And they wonder how come they're being punished. They wonder how come now the whole circuit or the whole system is tearing apart. The whole system is being broke apart. It's because of their actions, of how that they have reacted and responded since the 80s. You know, there was a long time there for about 10 or 12, 15 years, they wouldn't even allow for a Bible to be nowhere near a school. Don't even think about bringing it to a courthouse. We ain't operating under that same guideline no more. And it wasn't until Donald Trump come in power to where we was allowed to say Merry Christmas and actually put figures of Christmas out into our yard without having to worry about going to jail. There's a lot of things that Donald Trump has done that's been good. And I'll admit it. I supported a lot of his things that he done in the beginning part of his presidency, especially whenever it comes to taking care of our veterans. But there's also a lot of things that I disagree with pertaining to what Donald Trump has done. And this, on this last get up, as the blind man say, well, even a blind man can see through this towards understanding what went on with this kind of charade. I'm just trying to get my voice out there so that people can understand how the founder of the Windmill Ministries has been taken advantage of. He never was supported. They didn't believe in him. They didn't want to support his ideals. I'm just trying to get my message out to the general public that right now, in the year 2021, looking towards something big possibly going to happen here in America, we could have avoided all of this from the Christian society standpoint if they would have done the right thing in 1988 towards telling the people how that the nuclear arms agreement ever come in power to begin with. We could all be experiencing a utopia and a peace, not just here in America, but throughout the world. But they didn't want peace. They said that they wanted peace. White man speaketh with forked tongue. But it wasn't shortly after 1988, whenever they made the agreement, then the next thing you know, they go to war. Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Then we go to war again and spend over $6 trillion pertaining to the Iraqi war that Saddam Hussein never had no bombs of mass destruction. You wonder what has occurred here. The infliction that has fallen upon to the politics in this country goes back to the original core, goes back to its original deal that happened. And I keep pointing my finger. To 1983 and 1988, 1983 and 1988. These are events that I can prove, okay, pertaining to the 9 tapes, and I still get no support. So whatever happens, the fault falls upon the feet of those that did not want to participate in the Windmill Ministries, as far as I'm concerned. Once more, the ministry has not failed the people, but the people failed the ministry. Because obviously they was either scared, frightened, full of hypocrisy. They've never been saved to the point that they really don't believe in heaven, or they don't believe in the true Bible of all the things that the Bible teaches that has happened and is predicted to happen. Something has occurred here. When a man dedicates over half of his life, spends probably over $500,000 on his own money, wears out 4 or 5 automobiles, including himself, towards getting his message out, and there's still not people supporting the ministry. Something has terribly went wrong whenever an individual don't even have but 1 or 2 supporters that believe in him. And right now, I'm speaking to local law enforcement around Obion and Weakley County and the surrounding areas, without even merging into Kentucky, or without even merging into Oklahoma, or without even merging over into downtown Atlanta. Now let's listen to the rest of this guy and see what he's got to say that I know is going to be half-truths and misleading.
On more significant charges, and that's exactly what has happened. For example, yesterday, again, only days after this event happened.
Let's back it up a little bit. I don't want to get accused of trying to edit something.
Several days. It's really quite incredible. Now, after those charges are filed, then we have the ability to then indict these individuals on more significant charges, and that's exactly what has happened. For example, yesterday, again, only days after this event happened, we had the grand jury in the District of Columbia up. It was booked throughout the entire day, and for several hour upon hour, prosecutors in our office presented felony cases, significant felony cases related to civil disorder, related to the possession of destructive devices, related to the possession of semi-automatic weapons that are illegal to possess in the district. So, again, I just want to clarify that the initial charges we're filing, some of these misdemeanors, these are only the beginning. This is not the end. So what are we looking at downstream here? So in terms of what we're looking at is the initial charges everyone's familiar with, the zip tie guys, the Munchels, and the Brocks that were arrested on the House floor with zip ties rifling through the House floor. People are familiar with online. They see the Barnetts and Johnsons who were literally rifling through Pelosi's office and stealing items, stealing materials, mail, and sometimes even personal mementos. So those are the cases the public's familiar with. They're familiar with those cases because of social media. But what the public isn't familiar with is that the FBI, working with the U.S. Attorney's offices across the country, and the crux of those being in D.C., we're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy. Just yesterday, our office organized a strike force of very senior national security prosecutors and public corruption prosecutors. Their only marching orders from me are to build seditious and conspiracy charges related to the most heinous acts that occurred in the Capitol. And these are significant charges that have felonies with prison terms of up to 20 years. In addition to that, we're looking and taking a priority with cases in which weapons were involved and cases in which destructive devices were involved. As people know through news reports, there were pipe bombs found outside the Capitol. The ATF is working on that. Metro Police is working on that. FBI is working on that to find that individual or individuals who planted those devices.
How come we had to find out all the information that he's telling us right now through not just social media, but through mainstream media? This has been all over CNN News. It's been all over local night news. It's been all over just about every network that you can think of. So it's not just social media that has unrevealed the genie out of the bottle, because these are all things that we already aware about. We already seen the tape. We already heard what went on. You can't ignore the fact that we know the truth. What we don't know, this is the question that I got, and I'm sure most of us do. If this was a true blue conspiracy beginning with Donald Trump and those that surrounded Donald Trump, pertaining to Donald Trump's cabinet, how come there has not been a sweep of individuals? I don't care if their last name is Trump or if their last name is Bump. How come there has not been a sweep beginning at the top, the head honchos in all of this? How come you're going after the little fish whenever you know the big fish are the ones that played on the little fish, that basically set the little fish up to the point that the little fish took the bait? Entrapment. They was set up by one of the big fish. More than one big fish, and you know it was more than one big fish. It was a whole party of people that it was almost like this whole thing was staged. It was like they knew it was going to happen, and that's the reason why the main forces was not there pertaining to the National Guard or the military. The Capitol Police, a lot of them was involved and done already discussed. It was almost like that it was a staged event, that this is what we're going to do now whenever they come. Rather than shoot and start killing a bunch of people, let's just try to be friendly and let's just try to conduct this in a friendly form. Kind of like the way that they done over there in Portland, Oregon, whenever they decided to take that whole block, that city block over. And whenever they decided to take the police precinct over, I don't forget now the name of the town. There was a lot of violence. A lot of stuff got burnt down to the ground. I think the president had to go over there and declare state of an emergency on 2 or 3 different things and helped a bunch of businesses out that wound up suffering so bad. But how come we're not seeing the instigators that instigated this, that formatted this, going to jail? Once more, this is a lot of poppycock talk. Poppycock talk goes a long way. And there's no doubt the little fish should be reprimanded. The little fish should suffer the consequences. But so should the big fish. I don't care if they was working with Secret Service. I don't care if they was captain working for the Capitol Police. I don't care if it was a mayor, a governor, an assistant mayor, a lieutenant mayor. I don't care if they was working with Homeland Security. I don't care if it was in the cabinet of the White House pertaining to Donald Trump's whole family. Look at Rudy Giuliani that gets up there and talks about, we're going to handle this combat way. Combat. Does anybody know what combat means? That means violence. That's what combat means. It's a newer word. It's an updated word. Other than saying military violence, they say military combat. It's a fancy word, but means the exact same thing. Combat means violence. It's the next thing to being on the same level as war. But now you can have combat violence and it not actually be an out-and-out war according to our Congress, because according to our Congress, they have to declare it as a war. Well, whenever you have what you're facing right now towards what millions, possibly 1 billion people has already done seen, the world in general, and when you're scared to death towards what's going to happen in another, 10, 11 days, I don't think we need Congress to sit down and tell us that this is some kind of war. Regardless whether it be a culture war, a political war, a manufactured hypothetical war, a made-up lie war, or any other kind of war, whenever you have this type of disagreement that now is being spread abroad all over America, all these different land offices are being notified, you basically got war. It hadn't been declared as war. That's kind of like declaring America broke. We're $28 trillion in the red. Theoretically speaking, we're broke. Had nobody declared us being broke, but technically speaking, we're broke. But we keep borrowing from Paul to pay Peter. We keep kicking that can down the road, hoping that eventually somebody will come up with a solution. There's not going to be a solution over $28 trillion other than defaulting and starting all over again, such as I have declared myself, given a scenario such as the little farmer that planted the crop and only about half of it come up. He's got 2 choices. He can either live with what he's got, or he can disc it all under and replant. That's where we are as an American society. And that may be the reason why we're seeing such behavior coming out of the regular citizens of this that once more has basically been entrapped, misled, kind of like taking a piece of bait and putting it on a hook and going fishing. The little guy is the guy that's now getting all the raps, getting all the punishment. I'm sure there'll probably be one or two big heads that will go down eventually. That's already getting ready to retire anyway. Like I said, those people have no problem at all whenever it comes to voting themselves in a raise. You won't see them debate. You won't see them argue. You won't see them wish-washy around. Whenever they're going up for a raise, man, they're all in line. And man, yes, sir, we're getting a raise. We're going from this level to that level. But yet now, whenever it comes to sufficing the people, they'll haggle, they'll debate, they'll kick around, they'll stomp, romp, complain. Just like the stimulus check that was about 4 months behind. And that was about $1,500 too less. Where are we as a moving, projecting, future, promoting, forecasting society? Where are we going with all of this, if not on this particular scenario, but in the next scenario, or the scenario after that scenario? Is things just steadily going to fall apart? Are we going to continue to go in the red? Are we going to continue to see more crap happen here in America towards our system failing us? That's the question that the American people want to hear. We know you're going after the little fish, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with going after the little fish. But my God, you don't have to be a scientist to figure out who fumigated this. It wasn't the little fish. It wasn't the Proud Boys. It wasn't the Cuban or the QAnon whatever group or 17 other different groups that you want to throw out there. It was the main parties of our government that fumigated this. And the little man took the bait. And now you're going to punish the little man for taking the bait. And now you're not after the big guy that actually fumigated it? Come on. This is justice? This is justice? Really, FBI? Really? Is this how the justice goes in my life? Whenever I'm down there fighting tooth and nail towards trying to get my record straight in Oklahoma, and I make 2 telephone calls and suddenly I have to spend almost a year in jail? Really? Being concerned about 3 little children across the road? Really? This is justice? Really?
So, in addition to just those road cases we're looking at, we're going to focus on the most significant charges as a deterrent, because regardless of if it was just a trespass in the Capitol or if someone planted a pipe bomb, you will be charged and you will be found. In addition to that, we've also focused on an emphasis on assaults and batteries on police officers, both federal officers and local MPD officers that were assaulted. And as the days go on, there's going to be more social media, and people will recognize that in some instances, MPD and Capitol Police were in open-handed combat with some of these persons inside the Capitol, where tear gas was used on the Capitol Police and federal officers, and they were also used against some of these rioters. So the picture is going to build. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what happened within the Capitol, and it's going to...
We all seen what happened. We all seen what happened, FBI. The thing about what happened, okay? Listen to me carefully. If it would have been all blacks pertaining to the Black Panthers, there would have been a totally different response in how everybody would have reacted on that day. If it would have been a group of people from a Muslim country, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, whatever, if it would have been thousands of people that rushed the Capitol like that, it would, to this day, be a complete, total, different response. we would probably be declaring war on whatever group that had formulated this. And it wouldn't matter if it was Russia. It wouldn't matter if it was Mexico citizens. It wouldn't matter if it was the camel jockeys down in the Middle East. It wouldn't matter if it was the people that's got slant eyes, or the people over in China, or the people in Cuba, or it wouldn't matter. This is being handled ineffectively, just like how that the safety was handled ineffectively. Now we want to know the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. Because this continues to keep happening again and again and again. And maybe not so much on this level, and maybe not so much on the 911 level, but when you have Ruby Ridge, and you have people that's being charged for the Atlanta Olympic bomb blowing up that shouldn't have never got charged, whenever you have things that has occurred in Oklahoma and down in Mount Carmel towards Waco, and you continue to see people being mutilated, and it doesn't matter if it's school children or praying people. It doesn't matter if it's people in theaters or colleges or nightclubs or in casinos. Whenever you continue to see this again and again and again, you have to ask yourself a question. If New Zealand can take away automatic assault rifles and make it an absolute priority after they went through one massive killing, how come we as a society can't deal with our problems in a more professional, adequate way? They're not putting their finger where the finger should be put. They're beating the horse, as my grandfather used to say. They're beating the horse on the wrong end.
Come into laser focus, I think, over the next weeks and days, and I think people are going to be shocked with some of the egregious contact that happened.
Weeks and days, people's going to disappear. Weeks and days, the evidence is going to disappear. The evidence will grow cold. It'll be a cold trail. Different people pertaining to senators, congressmen, law enforcement agencies. They'll move around. They'll either quit, change their position, rehire somebody else, or they're getting ready to retire anyways. So the true people who done this, who agitated this, other than just using Donald Trump as an scapegoat, but the true people are going to slip through the cracks and never be scathed. That is so sad, especially whenever we, the people, have seen this happen to us again and again and again.
Within the Capitol. The third area emphasis that our office is also focusing on is we set up a strike force to focus on assaults on the media. Some people aren't familiar that some of those rioters specifically targeted members of the media and assaulted them. So we have assigned specific prosecutors in our office to focus on those cases as well. And I'm naming all these different strike forces to just emphasize, regardless of who the victim was, regardless of who the perpetrator was, we're treating all of these cases equally. Thank you very much.
We will now begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, you may press star, then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you're using a speakerphone, please pick up your handset before pressing the keys. To withdraw your question, please press star, then 2. The first question is from Pete Williams from NBC News. Please go ahead.
So can you clarify for us what intelligence did the FBI gather before the assault on the Capitol about the potential for violence, and how did it share it, and did it share it to the Capitol Police?
We received a lot of intelligence, like I said in my statement, a lot of intelligence information through all different means. be it through social media or through CHSs, sources, and then we have a sharing mechanism with JTTFs. Across the country, we have Joint Terrorism Task Forces, and in this city, in D.C., we have a very robust JTTF. And in that, we have Capitol Police, Park Police, MPD, and all the other federal law enforcement partners. We shared intelligence through the JTTF model, and we also shared it through our command post structure, and then also through other means of they have access to our information readily available because they have access to our systems. So all that